So software is really important. Man, during my life, it's grown so much. My first assignment after getting my master's degree was at NSA in 1973, and I worked on crypto boxes for satellites, and we were very excited about the 256-bit chips we had. While I was there, we worked on 1K chips. And of course, there were special things that they had to do because they were for satellites. They had to operate in radiation environments and everything, But you know what's happened there. As far as software, during my career in the Air Force, software went from being a little add-on that had some special capabilities to being a component, to being a subsystem, to being a system, to being the system of systems. And now throughout the world, we've been racing to make software more complex and more interconnected than ever before. And we love what it does. It brings us all kinds of great capabilities. But through that complexity, through that interconnection, we've opened great attack surfaces all over the place. And we see that. I mean, by and large, software is actually pretty good. But even if there's 1% flaws, even if there's 1/100% flaws that are exploitable in software, there's lots of them. We have to remember that. Software, comes in all kinds of categories. Sometimes we're not even aware of all the software we're using, because we're not always aware of the operating system behind the scenes, the development environment that the software is built on, the supply chain for the software. A lot of talk about software bill of materials. I don't think we could do it. We don't know all the connections to software, where it was built, where it came from. We use repositories of software, libraries. We don't often know where that came from. We just know we can use it. And today, more and more software is composed from pieces that exist rather than being written. Now, a lot of the newer software is on the application side, and that's where we see everything, including all the stuff on our phones. And I just love that phone when I think about it, because I think of the satellites. I built satellites for the Air Force, what we would call satellites for national technical means. That's the word we use. And we didn't have the power of that phone in those satellites. People went to the moon, didn't have the power of that phone. So it's just amazing what's happened there. So we live in a software world, and of course our friend Mark Andreessen, in 2010 wrote that article about software is eating the world, that this isn't just true of high-tech industry, this is all industries. All industries depend on software now. Whoops, let's see, there we go. And so you can see, you look across the board. There was a time when the military was pacing technology in our country. That time's gone. The commercial world is pacing technology in our country because of all the applications. And whereas in the 50s and 60s, we also often had spin out of the government to the commercial world, now we often have spin in. And unfortunately, when you have spin in, that technology is kind of available to everybody in the world. And sometimes we're not as fast at spinning in as the Chinese or the Russians or other countries. We have to be very wary of that. Now, the demand for software, you can see this, the influence. 41% of the software being built these days is kind of used in the tech sectors, but a lot of it's used in non-tech sectors. And again, this is almost invisible to us. You don't think about all the software involved when you use your phone. You don't think about all the software involved when you watch Netflix, or when you order from Amazon. But all these industries are based upon software and the interconnections that happen. The amount of software is just amazing, and gosh, with Ray Sidney here, I'm almost afraid to show this in the next slide because we talk about how much software is in the search engine for Google. But almost all these applications have lots of software, This is putting it in terms of War and Peace, which was a big book. Some of you may have read it. But, the software in QuickBooks, it's like 140 copies of War and Peace. Facebook, 600, almost 1,000 copies of War and Peace of the software there. And I think the next slide's where I got my Google web search, like 30,000 War and Peace copies, of software. And it's really even hard to say how big software is because it's linked to other things and developed in other places. And again, that software bill of materials is hard to figure out. McCabe, says the future of digital systems is complexity, and complexity is the worst enemy of security. That's true. The Defense Science Board, more lines mean more flaws. More function points mean harder to test, harder for users to understand. Trustworthiness is a big thing. As we start to grow into AI, we've got those same issues in spades. We don't even know how AI systems are often making their decisions. It's not very transparent to us. It's an issue. It's really an issue if you're going to use AI in systems that might involve lethality because you don't want to have an accident. It's one thing if you're using AI to figure out what you're going to order from Amazon. It's another thing if you're using AI to select targets for weapons. There's famous cases, of we thought we knew how this system was working, tell dogs from wolves, man, 100% right. Then you find out it was always keen on snow, because snow was in the pictures of the wolves and wasn't in the picture of the dogs. We got to know how these algorithms are making their decisions, and yet it's very hard with these statistical-based deep learning systems that we have today. For years and years, we've looked at this V here, and when we do iterative development, we don't really follow the V quite like that, but we follow it on a micro scale, and many of the flaws are introduced in the early stages of programs and only found in the late stages or even after programs are deployed, when it's very expensive and hard to fix them. That's something that DevOps helps with because we do so much testing early on, daily testing, and we can continue to improve the type of testing we do early in programs to find these mistakes earlier and earlier, which will really help. But one thing that we have to fess up to is that this is not just a technical problem. And while we're great technical people, we might try to attack it as a technical problem. It's also a socio-technical problem. Some of the worst things that have happened in software vulnerabilities have been caused by insiders. Some intentional, trying to do malicious things. Some you and me and others who mistakenly did something and opened up something to exploit. I'm a savvy guy on this. I fell for a phishing attack about 7 years ago. I was tired. I was coming back from India in Frankfurt after an overnight flight to Frankfurt, and now getting ready to come home, checking on email. Fortunately, I was on my iPad and going through a VPN. And I was working on the Defense Science Board at the time on a big summer study on autonomy. I got a message from the chair of the Defense Science Board, Eric Evans, a friend of mine who's the chair, the CEO of Lincoln Lab, saying, Paul, I just saw this report, and he always wrote short things. I just saw this report on autonomy. I think you'd find it interesting. It made sense. I clicked on that. And fortunately, through the VPN, my organization cut it off because the site, it was a Chinese site. They knew Eric Evans was the head of the DSB. They knew I was the chair of that study. Some of these are getting pretty sophisticated, these phishing attacks. It's no longer just Nigerian princes trying to give you money. So we have to understand that there's lots of vectors here. Poor development is one of them, and we can try to work on that. Lax operational processes is another one, and we don't always have all the people in our IT shops, all the CISOs and CSOs, et cetera, we need out there in the world, in the whole supply chain to do that. We have these highly connected supply chains where one problem, one place in there can really affect tens of thousands of issues. And we'll talk about SolarWinds in a little second here. And we do have hackers, criminals, advanced persistent threats that are out there as well. So these give rise to many attack vectors. And there's the pre-existing things. There's the mistakes that are in code that people do try to exploit. That happens a lot. There's other kind of vulnerabilities that can be pushed, including the phishing, credit card fraud. How many of you have ever had your credit card hacked? Come on, be honest. How many have ever had your personal information stolen? Yeah, I was in the OMB when all that sort of stuff. Yeah, we've all been suspect to this. We've all had this happen to us. But then there's also the advanced persistent threats, the well-financed cyber criminals that are doing all kinds of new things to us. I mean, even if you had great written code, you could still have these vulnerabilities because of the complexity and the attack surface out there. Some people in my business say, oh, gosh, AI is going to help us on this. We can have AI kind of continuing to red team our code. And that's true. It could help. It could raise the bar some. But there's also the vulnerabilities in the AI code itself and the complexity that the AI code itself has. And we all know about how important the data is that you build your AI system on, how you have to make sure it spans the areas of interest that you care about, or it might just be in a little niche of that window and you might get some wrong things, and how it's so suspect to intentional or unintentional bias in its data. And we've heard famous cases of that as well. So let's just, we'll hit a few of these. I don't know if we got time to hit them all. AWS was hit with a denial of service attack in 2020. It was the largest denial of service attack I think it ever happened. And they worked their way through that, but my gosh, there's that 2.3 terabits of data that you were talking about before. Twitter has had all kinds of things happen to them, and they got their own issues right now, as we know. But in one of the attacks, people were pretending to be Joe Biden, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates, asking for money. Not asking for money for themselves, that wouldn't pass the test, but asking for money for charities or something like that, for climate change, whatever. And these are very convincing attacks. Intentional insiders still are often the largest, most devastating attacks that can occur. And this particular one is GE Aviation, where they build engines, and it was a Chinese attack to get some of the engine technology that we've developed over the years. Hello Kitty ransomware. Gosh, I was at a conference, my first international conference in 2.5 years, about 3 weeks ago in Dublin. We had something like 80 countries there, and a lot of the talk was about ransomware. And it was interesting for them to talk about the maturation of the ransomware industry, how it's becoming vertically disintegrated. People are specializing in just one part of this. Some people find the vulnerabilities. Some people sell those to another person that might exploit them. The exploiter may not be the person who collects the money. They may pass that off to another organization that actually collects the money or negotiates for the money. In addition, there's specialization in another dimension. There are people who only attack universities, and they specialize in when the new students show up every year. That's the best time to do some phishing attacks, because they want to get into the university environment and learn everything. They're ones who only attack municipalities, and we've heard of some of those. People who only attack hospitals. Ugh, what a horrible thing to do, but people do that, And so there's specialization in this business, because with specialization you get extra skills and you get to know how to do this better and better. SolarWinds, though, is maybe one of the most famous ones recently, and was a supply chain attack. SolarWinds built software that was helping to monitor nets, et cetera. And if you can get into them and put some malware in their software is in 30,000 companies' databases, in their chain of materials. And not only did it affect those 30,000 companies, but it has affected the suppliers they had, the subcontractors they had, the people they dealt with. So here was an attack that proliferated, exponentiated throughout the business. In software, we love to scale, right? That's the bad way to scale, when you can scale your attack and hurt us. And then, of course, real hardcore cyber espionage is one of the things that's out there, too, and there's been lots of famous cases about that. So all these threats and attacks, though, do spur innovation. And one of the things I'm hoping is that I motivate at least 1 or 2 Hertz fellows to get involved in this later in their lives, because we need the kind of horsepower, the kind of innovative ideas that Hertz fellows bring to the table. Okay? And just like our friend Dave Gallus started off as a physicist and became a great biologist and gene guy, we need people that come from different fields. That's another dimension of diversity that's very important. We don't want people to come at this only from a computer science viewpoint. I want people to come at this from a bio viewpoint, from a sociology viewpoint, from any kind of alternate view that might give us more insight. So I hope we can motivate somebody to do that. Some of the words that you hear now, of course, cloud security, everybody says, oh, you just put it in the cloud and then the experts take care of it. The clouds have been attacked too, There's issues there. If we just encrypt stuff, well, at some point, how much are you going to encrypt, And if we get quantum computers, how good are those going to be? We're going to have all new encryption routines. Zero trust is a buzzword used in government now, and everybody goes, I just want to buy some of that zero trust. Well, you know, zero trust is a strategy. It's not a thing. It's something to try to help you with lateral movement inside your system so that people, once they're in, can't get everything that you've got, right? You know the other buzzwords here and I love the fact that my folks had put Hackams on here because it's such a famous program, and Kathleen and DARPA can be so proud of that. AI tooling, I spoke about this a little bit, you know. There's a lot of vulnerabilities in AI. We don't work on this so much in the Software Engineering Institute, but some of the academic side of CMU has done a lot of work on how you can spoof AI algorithms, how you can fool AI. One of the most credible things I saw is, you know, train stuff on facial recognition, you know, and you can train things pretty well in facial recognition to pick out faces, and Clear does that, I guess, you know, in the airline business, there's lots. But one of the guys at CMU, he'd put like a pair of glasses on that had a few speckles strategically picked in the frame. And instead of it picking his picture out, and he's a skinny male of Middle Eastern descent, it identified him as Oprah Winfrey. And you or I would never have made that mistake, but the AI algorithm did. And this shows the brittleness of AI algorithms right now, and why it's very important if you're involved with some sort of lethality or something, you better start understanding that brittleness fast before you do anything bad. Lethality often is involved with the military, you know, but nowadays, if we have self-driving cars, there could be unintentional lethality, right? So a lot of the commercial world's starting to face up to the issues of lethality in their AI systems as well. We talked about mistraining. People can poison your data. People can reverse engineer your algorithms if they have access to the algorithm and figure out what it is keying on, and then use that to help fool it. And then there's the issue of bias that we've all sort of seen and tried to work against. You know, I think one thing that we're learning from the bias in AI systems is, once again, the biases we all have. They might not be intentional. You know, they might be things we would really work against if we knew that we were biased that way, but we all have biases. That's how we make decisions on things we didn't see before. That's how we generalize things, so we have to understand that. Oh, I always have to talk about the hygiene side, and I know that's kind of boring to people, but hygiene does make a difference. And you know, right now the Defense Department is trying to push something called CMMC, which we had a little bit of a role at us in Hopkins APL. And there's been controversy about it because the initial version of it was going to require in-person assessors at every level of the supply chain, all the way down to a mom-and-pop store that maybe, you know, sells $25,000 worth of stuff to the Department of Defense, and the assessments were going to cost $50,000 a year or something like that. They've revised that. They've tried to make it simpler. They're trying to make it more self-reporting at certain levels. But at the very basis, cyber hygiene is there, and right now all contractors that deal anything with the Department of Defense already self-certified that they follow good cyber hygiene, and yet, in fact, most don't. And if you talk about the defense industrial base, we always think of the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grummans, the Raytheons. There's 300,000 companies in the United States that are in the defense supply chain, when you really look at it. Okay? The Department of Defense is trying to reach out even more. Wisely, they say, oh, we want more of that innovation that's out there in the commercial world. We want to be simpler to deal with. But they don't really want to be much simpler to deal with because they still want to impose all these requirements on even the smallest company that might have a lot of innovation. We face a real shortfall of cybersecurity professionals. Gosh, we really face a shortfall of almost all tech professionals, software engineers, AI engineers, data scientists throughout our country. This is something that, you know, at the high end, the Hertz Fellows help, but how do we get the low end and bring the bar up for our whole society to be more tech savvy? Look at this, 33% projection of job growth for information security specialists, 82% shortage of cybersecurity skills, talent gaps of 71% or more. This is really tough, and we keep working at that even at the community college, junior college level, but we keep falling further behind. And now the new things that are coming along maybe even pose new challenges. Leveraging those cloud-based technologies is a really good thing. The hybrid workplace that we all rushed into with COVID, it's proving to be very very good in so many ways. Lots of productivity still there. People enjoy it. It frees up time. It builds work-life balance. But it does impose some extra issues with respect to cybersecurity that we're still kind of working our way through. And the federal government just went to these new standards of what they call controlled unclassified information. It used to be FOUO, but they put all kinds of new requirements on that. I don't know if you can look at CUI information in your home anymore if you're there. One thing I just couldn't believe, FOUO, we used to shred, and there was a certain kind of shredding that needed to be done. With the new CUI standards, you have to have shredders that are like 2 levels up from that. So all the shredders that all the defense contractors and government agencies in the country have are going to have to be replaced. Our digital supply chains are more complex. Of course, we are global digital supply chains. We have software that was developed in China, developed in Russia, developed other places. For a long time, many people in the United States were using Kaspersky security and for their computers. We have to be wary of that much more than we did now. And then the increased use of AI and machine learning is really opening up some new challenges for all of us that we have to address in cybersecurity, but also in ethics and in legal issues as well. So I'll be ending here just to talk about, man, we love our software. We love what it does for us. We love what it brings to us. We love the ease and convenience. Boy, when the pandemic sent us all home, how many of us used Amazon more than before? How many of us used all the video teleconferencing services so much to stay connected to family, to work, to our friends? We get a lot of capability from software, and that's going to continue. We don't want to slow that down. But we do want to address the fact that there are security issues that come with this. And it's going to require the very best of our country, the very best of the world to address. Through many ways, these things can be addressed, be attacked by cyber criminals. Right now, one of the things that's going on that I'm just so happy about, actually, is this move. The cyber criminals now want to be paid in Bitcoin because it's less traceable. And thank God my dad would not know how to buy Bitcoin. So this is protecting a lot of exploits of old people right now in our society. But ultimately, cybersecurity is everyone's concern, everybody in this room, everybody in our nation, everybody in the world. And I want the best of the Hertz people to kind of work on this as we go to the future.